What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Chrissy Sarah, anyone here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing you a video review of episode 4 now of Power Rangers Ninja Steel. So we are now halfway through the spring or / winter time period of the show, and it looks pretty good. Halfway through that, meaning we're still early in the show, but before you know it, we will move on to the later half when Gold will have already been introduced and everything. But I wanted to do a review of this one. This one's called Presto Chango-o. This one's focused, if you haven't figured out already, on Preston the Blue Ranger for this episode. So this is his focus episode, and it's an early episode, so it's obviously going to be one that's actually going to develop and help us understand who he is as a character. Obviously, that is the goal with these early episodes now, is to primarily focus in on giving background to the 5 of them. And he is the second one to get attention. Obviously, Brody was the first really that got attention. So what happens here in this episode, it starts off with us seeing Preston trying to put on a magic show, and he does so. The thing is that Victor challenges part of his magic act, where he ends up saying, I have just an ordinary empty hat, and he says, hold on one second, and he ends up checking it. He ends up seeing a bunny rabbit in there, and so the magic is basically busted at that point. So people think he's just a joke, and people have been thinking that already. Like, you already know this from a prior episode, that basically people look at him and say he's not really a great magician. So what happens is that they think, okay, well, that's that. So then it moves on to the second preview clip, which really should have been the first clip, but you get the point. That clip was the one where we see Preston talking to Brody about his magic and how ever since he went to a magic show when he was 5, he's always wanted to be a magician, because the guy managed to put a bracelet on his wrist, and a dragon bracelet, which makes sense based off the Zord and everything, on his wrist out of nowhere, and he's always wanted to be a magician ever since then. And then suddenly Brody ends up seeing that Preston ends up pulling out rabbits out of his hat, which are not the one that he actually brought with him. So what happens is that Brody's like, okay, well, maybe it has something to do with your powers or something like that. And you see, that's the thing that is so important, because when I originally saw this episode, when I originally saw the clips and everything, I wasn't sure how to interpret it, because I could have expected it to be more of a temporary ability rather than something that would be lasting, and maybe something that a monster would have contributed to. Fortunately, they didn't do that. They actually did it in a way that I actually like a lot better, which is that, I'll get to that, but we're almost there. The idea is that then Brody ends up saying that maybe you can talk to the others and try to figure out what's going on with that. And so then we move on to the next clip, which is basically the next preview clip. Like, basically the preview clips are like come one and one after another, in other words. So it's kind of like, it's interesting to think that. But this clip, basically, it's like Preston shows off that he has magical abilities, and what happened, he shows it when they're trying to fix up Brody's father's car. And what happens is that Calvin and Haley are trying to get it started and everything, and Haley puts her drink on top of the car, where near the engine area, and then it falls over onto Calvin, who is on the ground trying to fix underneath the truck. And when it's about to fall on him, Preston manages to use his magic to stop it, and then he is able to let go, and they realize that, wow, he may actually have magical abilities. Why do I keep on saying Kelson? Mick, who is Kelson Henderson. That's why I keep on saying it. Mick ends up speaking to Preston, trying to deduce things, because it's like because he knows that he's not the best magician, and they all know that, and he ends up reasoning that because of their ninja steel powers, the thing that they desire most is the thing that will be strengthened the most. So, for example, in his case, he wants to be a really good magician, so his magic skills are improved significantly due to his ninja steel powers, and so that is what is strengthened. And then you may think to yourself, that sounds cool, that sounds great. Well, there's more to it, and it makes a lot of sense. So what happens is that then from there we end up seeing what do you call it? Galvanox is trying to do an attack on the Rangers. What ends up happening is that he actually says that he wants to attack as himself this time. And at that point, what happens is that since Brody is going to deal with the pet shop and all that, there's a monster attack. And the monster attack is Galvanox, for real. This time it's Galvanox, Madame Odious, and Ripcon, as well as a bunch of bashers. Well, what happens is that attack is happening, and what happens is that Galvanox is like, I will take you out because I spared your life and let you live on my ship, Red Ranger. But now I will. But you've stolen the Ninja Nexus prism from me, and now I will take my revenge on you for doing so. And Brody's like, no, but you have to remember something. You also killed my father, or like you got rid of my father, or something like that. And so then, there's just that argument, and then he's like, well, what can you say? You're just one person. How could you just fight me? And then he says, well, it's not just me. And then he snaps. Suddenly, the 4 other Rangers appear before him, and they're like, whoa, that's who Galvanox is, because they never had seen him yet. They'd only heard of Galvanox. So at that point, they finally have their first encounter with Galvanox and the others. And the thing is that the biggest issue, the funny thing is that Sarah and Haley tried to like refer to him as a chump, and rather than referring to him as this powerful being. It's just funny. And so then what happens is that Madame Odious basically says, like, I think it's Madame Odious or Ripcon basically says, like, like Galvanox, I don't, like, sir, I don't think that it would be wise for you to maybe fight them. You haven't been fighting as of late, and your fans may look at that and say, may see it very poorly if you're fighting and you get beaten by them, especially since you're not in the best condition right now. And he's like, all right, very well. So then he summons Sluggeron, and Sluggeron is like a turtle monster. And he has like extinguishers on his sides, and the idea is that he ends up using a special mist to go into Calvin, Sarah, and Haley's eyes, and this mist causes them to feel weird, and then it's explained a little bit later. But what happens is that they end up fighting and everything, and then Preston ends up using his magical abilities to even like burn Sluggeron, and then they return to their school lives, where Preston puts on another magic show, this time with his magical abilities enhanced. The thing is that first he ends up calling Victor to be a volunteer, and he says, he ends up saying some magic spell that's supposed to summon a gentle kitty instead, like a gentle kitten. Instead, it summons a gigantic like jaguar or puma, or puma, or something like that. And at that point, they were like all freaked out. So then it's like, maybe Monty can do it. And so then Monty comes over, and he has a magic trick done him, which is the whole entire cutting his body in half trick with the boxes. And the thing is that it doesn't work. Well, there's a reason, and we get to that very soon. But what happens is that suddenly Calvin, Haley, and Sarah aren't doing very well, so they end up trying to go home to their own homes or whatever, but suddenly they end up becoming really, really slow. That is what happened with Sluggeron. He ended up making them slow down, and due to that factor, when they tried to morph, they ended up having their ninja power stars stolen by Sluggeron, and he looks like a good guy. He looks like he's doing well. He's a really good fighter and everything. But then suddenly what happens is that they end up realizing that things aren't working with the magic and everything else. And at that point, what happens is that Brody and Preston go to help Sarah, Haley, and Calvin, because they get a comm. They end up getting a message basically saying help. So they end up going over there to try to fight the monster. And they end up using their final attacks, and they end up beating him up, and just eventually just beating up Sluggeron and getting back their power. And when they defeat Sluggeron, they return back to normal. At that point, what happens is that they then summon the Megazord, because Sluggeron is chosen to grow big, because you have to remember there is that aspect of whether or not they give him a second chance or not, which they do, and this time they end up fighting and everything. But what happens is that he ends up having the ability to fly. So at that point they don't have anything to fly with. Preston tries to use his Dragozord. Brody even tries to climb the buildings with his red Robozord, but this time they end up saying, well, maybe I wish there was a way for the Megazord to fly. And that was when Preston basically says, I have an idea, maybe we can do something about that. Suddenly they end up using the Ninja Steel Megazord Dragon Mode formation, which is the Dragon Mode version of the Megazord, and they finally get to use it, which allows them to have that version, which shows it as a gigantic Dragon Zord, and it's awesome. And they end up beating Sluggeron, and at that point they then return back to the normal episode. So basically the idea, I don't remember exactly where it happened, but the general idea was that in order for the magic to work well, he has to be doing it because he's trying to do it for good and helping someone, not for bragging rights or anything like that. Not just to look cool. He has to do it because, like, in other words, it's gonna work when he does it, when he's trying to save someone or be helpful. If he's just doing it for personal gain, it's always gonna fail. So that's basically what the whole entire idea behind that is that when he does it, when it's not for personal gain, it will always work. But when he does it for personal gain, it won't work. Doesn't mean that it will never work, but the chances of it working are much slimmer. So then at that point, obviously the monster is destroyed, so then they end up trying to bring Monty back to normal because Monty wasn't able to be put back to normal originally, and so this time when they try to put him back, they kind of put him back, but he ends up being with this blocky body or whatever, and then in the end they kind of just say sorry, and they say like he'll just be more careful and everything, and then eventually and like he understands what he did wrong, and he understands what he should keep in mind, and then eventually they finally show off Brody's father's truck in pristine, nice condition, and the episode pretty much ends, and they go in the truck. Overall, I really like this episode. It was a cool episode. Some people have said that it's a really amazing episode. I thought it was really good. I don't know if I would say it's like amazing. I think it was really good, though. I don't know if I would say it was one of the best episodes I've seen in a while, but it's definitely a really good episode. Like it was a very solid episode with a good premise, and I was happy that they made it so it was a longer lasting thing. It wasn't something where it was like, oh yeah, a few episodes he'll have the magical abilities for a few episodes, or maybe like just this episode. No. Magical abilities exist. It's just how he'll be using them will be more often, but he'll use them when it makes sense rather than just using them for personal gain. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, and it also means that he'll be able to apply magical skills when he needs to, but for the benefits of actually helping people rather than just doing it for himself. So it's going to be really nice to see how that's going to work out, and I'm really happy about that. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next episode and the following one. I forget whose focus episode it is. I think it's either Calvin or Haley gets the next focus episode, and whichever one it isn't, then they get it the following episode. So if it's Calvin this week, then it's Haley next week, or if it's Haley this week, and then it's Calvin the following week, I believe. So it should be pretty interesting to see how this goes, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the show progresses from here. I'm also curious about the other Zords, obviously, because we've only seen the Core 5. We haven't seen the Tusk Zord yet, although that is supposed to be a combination that should be coming fairly soon. We haven't seen any of the other ones either. I mean, you have to remember, I'm not saying that I'm expecting them to do it all right away, but there was definitely a lot more that was shown. But at the same time, in Japan, like, this many episodes in was pretty much like how much progress they had gotten. Like, I don't think I think that they've actually been consistent and haven't skipped any episodes so far that the Japanese show had. So that's going to be interesting to see how things will progress and when will they start skipping episodes. But I'm looking forward to everything. I can't wait to see how this show progresses, and I'm liking it so far. I'm liking Sarah a little bit more than I was before, and but I still have to say Haley is my personal favorite character from this season so far. Not saying that means that will stay forever, but as of now, I would say Haley is my favorite character. Haley the White Ranger. So I would love to know your guys' opinions about this episode and about the show in general so far. Are you enjoying it? What are your thoughts on it so far? What do you expect to see in the future of the show? I'd love to know what your thoughts are in the comments below. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.